Hello, everyone. You kind of all know me, but my name's Kip. I spent 12 years in the Air Force. I did straight through basic training, went on to the Hawk, graduated from the Hawk, went to 16 Squadron, which was then up at Lossiemouth, which was the Jaguar OCU. Then role disposed on to 54, which was down at Coltishall. 2.5 years there before going back to Valley as a tactics instructor. Did about 3 years there before moving back to Coltishall for a very short refresher on the Jag, before going to Oman, where I was on loan service for 3 years with the Omani Air Force, flying the Jags as well. So, which was great fun. At the moment, I'm involved in a variety of projects. One of them is looking at getting gyrocopters into the commercial world for survey, potentially anti-poaching, laser mapping and stuff, and a couple of other engineering projects as well. And we're also involved with Liverpool University, looking at wake turbulence on wind turbines for surveying them with autogyros. So yeah, I mean, it's all interesting stuff. So so I may as well crack on with some of these. Scariest moment in the air, from Mark, coming back across the pond from Canada to Larges, as a non-combat ready dude on the Jag. I had a bit of I prodded the basket a little bit too hard, and what happens is that you then get a whip that goes up the hose, but then it comes back again, and as it came back, it tweaked the probe, and the probe wouldn't go back in. Also added to that, I had a valve problem in the back of the jet, so with the probe out, it was fine, but obviously you're more draggy. With the probe in, I was venting fuel out the back, and I started to get quite a long way below everybody else. And this was sort of halfway to Larges, so we ended up having to bang the tanks off, and they readied the Nimrod on the search and rescue. So as a guy with not a lot of hours and fresh on the squadron, I'd probably been there, just trying to think, 6 months, maybe less. Yeah, that was quite sporty. What else? Longest flight, from Ryan, probably, I think it's about 5.5 hours. That was transiting back with a tanker from Turkey to the UK, swapping jets out. No autopilot, obviously, so yeah, that was a bit of a schlep and a half. How competitive was the Harrier Force with the Jags? Not very. We knew we were better than them. No, the Harrier, went to Afghanistan for obvious reasons. It had more power. It had a much better mixed load capability than the Jag. So in that respect, the Harrier, the later versions, the 7 and the 9, probably had the edge. Not quite as fast at low level, but 6 and 2 3s. Unfortunately, you had to deal with the Harry mates, so they had to cram their egos into the cockpit, which was obviously a bit of a weight penalty for them. What would be the best tank to being run down by an F4, F16, MiG 23, 27, 29? Well, yeah, get low and fast. You tend to find that the AD mates don't like being down at low level. They like to be up high. So take them into crap weather, hope that their ROE means that they can't just fire on you anywhere. So yeah, get down right in the weeds, and try and defeat them with a bit of ground clutter. I mean, we flew against the F-16s a lot in Oman, and they were, they had a good radar and they had incredible performance. So you're kind of up against it. But if you can drag the air defenders into the weeds, they tend to not like staying very long because they lose all their SA, and that's when they get shot by a lucky Jag who just appears in the right place at the right time. Miko, yeah, not a problem at all. The kit was, sorry, JAG's nav and target acquisition systems were updated after Gulf War One. How big a challenge was it for the pilots and ground crews to become familiar and operational with the new systems? I can only talk from the aircrew perspective, but for us, I've sat in a GR1 and I've flown in the GR1, and it was okay for the time, but with terrain reference navigation, the GPS and the IN all giving you a blended solution, it was brilliant. And then we had the big AMFD put in. So, and later on we had the interflight data link, the IDL, which meant you could, instead of having to just use the force in terms of where people were at low level, you could use your digital box at the back, your box 2, and you could send positional information just with the squeak of the radio, and that massively increased your SA at low level. So from our perspective, from a pilot's perspective, piece of cake. It was just different buttons to press, and it was far more accurate and a lot easier to use than the old INAS. Largest famous for jets landing critically low. Yeah, probably. Main differences between UK and French versions. Not entirely sure. I think the big one was the Laser Ranger, and obviously the weapons capability. The French had obviously their missiles. They had a really good targeting pod as well, but mostly the Laser Ranger in the nose, I think, was a Brit addition. Missiles, 9 Golf, which was generally not very good, and the Lima, which was pretty snazzy, with HMS as well, helmet mounted sight. It was actually pretty good. I shot off bore sight through the HMS on weapons camp against the Jindivik and the flare pack, and yeah, it's pretty good, pretty nifty bit of kit actually. The HMS was super simple, but actually really good. You could slew it to tiled as well, so your laser designator, but with the 9 Lima, you could slew it sort of, generally you wanted to keep it in the HUD, but you could if you wanted to just be outside the HUD as well. Why was Jag retired from the Air Force? Yeah, good question. It was just getting old and they wanted to save money. And that's essentially, they shut down Coltishall, moved the last remaining squadron to Coningsby, and they saved not a lot of money, but they saved some, and that was all that counted for them. Max speed of the Jag is 1,050 miles per hour. Pie in the sky, was it ever realistically attainable? Sorry, Adam. Yeah, we could do 1.4 from memory, Mach 1.4 at high level, 1.2 at low. So you probably, I mean, we used to, if you had big tanks on, you couldn't go above 0.95 was VNE. But you could, I mean, if you're talking knots to miles an hour multiplied by 1.15, a little bit pie in the sky maybe. But at height, you could do 1.4. So it's going to be close, but you certainly wouldn't see that at low level, definitely not. Chris Stern, what do you think about the Vulcan? There used to be one part Southend Airport, always wondered why it's part of it. Never flew the big stuff. As a strategic bomber, yeah, it had its day. As a V bomber, had its day. B-52 is a great platform now. As they found out in Afghanistan, you load it up with a bunch of GPS guided munitions, with a dude in the back typing all the lats and longs in. What an awesome CAS platform. You would never have thought it during the day. Not sure the Vulcan could have done that, but you never know. Favorite aircraft? A10. Sorry, Wonka Bar 1. Favorite aircraft? Yeah, A-10. Who's not going to love an aircraft built around a 30-foot Gatling gun? You ever take part in the air-to-ground comp at Lossy? No, I was only on the OCU, so as a student, so we never got to do that. Disappointingly, but there we go. Mississippi. Okay, nice to see you, Mark. Top speed I achieved in the Jag, low level, probably 620, 600, 620 knots. She get, and that was in Oman being chased down. So the thing is, with the blower in as well, and she's accelerating, she gets awfully twitchy. And we were at 50 feet as well in Oman. That was our OLF limit. So because the engines point slightly down, sort of towards the ground, when you plug the burners in, there's a bit of a nose pitch down. So she gets awfully twitchy at that sort of speed. Operating altitude of the Jag, I think maximum was 45,000 feet, but with anything meaningful on, you were limited to about 23 to 25 if you're really lucky. Trying to do everything with one. Lewis, good question. To have a mission-specific aircraft to do a particular job really well, or current philosophy of trying to do everything with one jet. Yeah, difficult one. I mean, you only got to look at the F-22, which is a stupendous aircraft, and that's kind of the argument for going one way. But then you look at something like the F-15 Eagle, and you kind of go, well, I remember we were in a 4-ship of Jags. We got airborne from the UK. We tanked over the North Sea, dropped into Denmark, and then sort of flowed all the way through Europe to hit a target. I think it was an aerial complex. And then back out through France, up and home. And there were 4 of us. And the retrograde, so if none of us got there, the retrograde was for the F-15 Eagle, which had 2 spare 2,000-pound LGBs that was loitering overhead our target, to schwack them if we didn't get there. And that's kind of the flip side of the coin. So certainly air supremacy, I would say, yes, a single type is preferable. When you talk, but if you're going to go bombers, I would say you want to go with the dual role, and probably 2-seat, possibly. Although Typhoon seems to be doing a pretty good job as a single-seater. Hugo, do you practice anti-ship mission while flying the Jag? Yeah, we do. But really, it was just for practice against the Navy. We didn't really carry any anti-ship munitions. And if you've ever gone up against the Navy, a decent Navy, you know that you'd be dead fairly quickly. We used to do a bunch of exercises with the Omani Navy, and as you turned in, and so I've done it with the Royal Navy as well, and as you turn into them, your RWI, radar warning receiver, literally melts. You just get lit up with everything, and you're really not gonna last long. Hardest part of operating at low level. Sorry, Wonka Bar. Yeah, hardest part of low level. I would say would be before we got the IDM, which was the in-flight data modem, where you could speak to the CAS guys, the forward air controllers. I would say CAS, low level, bad weather as a number 2, because you're trying to formate on your leader at 250 feet, possibly with a 500-foot cloud base, whilst typing in lat longs, TOTs, and trying to get your separation from the lead as well. That was pretty much the hardest thing, I think. And then you do that at night as well, but obviously not formatting on your lead. Reasonable time of Jag, maybe money. Yeah, to be honest, it was yeah, Miko, you're very right. It was an old aircraft. It was designed as a trainer. We took it as far as we could in terms of what it could do and what it could carry, but it only had 5 hard points, of which one of those would be ECM and one of them would be chaff. You then had either 1 jug or 2 jugs, leaving you either 1 or 2 hard points. Sorry, 2 on the center line or sort of 2 outboards. So it didn't have a particularly special loadout. And the RWR was a crystal one, so it wasn't a super het. So it struggles, and certainly if we knew that there was a modern Russian SAM anywhere out there, we'd just avoid it like the plague. You know, it was coming to the end of its life anyway. I mean, we loved it. It was a great jet. It was great fun to fly, and the squadrons, you know, we knew it wasn't a great jet, but we made it work, and everybody knew that. How confident were you at low-level Freckle Puny? You had no TFRs, F111, F15E, Tornado GO1. Yeah, low-level crap weather was our bread and butter, but obviously if it hits the ground, then, you know, as in the weather hits the ground, then you're screwed, and we would have to abort. But, you know, 300-foot cloud base, 500-foot cloud base, schneebling around, that was kind of our terrain. And we loved it. You know, we were pretty confident. As long as there was a letterbox somewhere, you give a jag mate, he'd find it, he'd sniff it out. Basically semantics. I'm flying. Yeah, you're a fighter. I didn't really. Yeah, the semantics between fighter and a bomber. Now we're a fast jet, so you're kind of a fighter. That's my opinion. Other people may split hairs about that one and say we were a bomber, but you know, if you're gonna split hairs, yeah, we were a bomber. But I always said I was a fighter pilot. That's just kind of the way it is. No worries, Miko, anytime. Anyone else? Anyone? Beulah? Oh, display work. No, that wasn't me. That was normally always taken by an instructor from 16 Squadron. So on the OCU, because the frontline squadrons were working their nuts off, the OCU used to take over the display, and one of the QFIs would normally be QFIs or QYs would do the display work. I think you tell me the great story you told me when you were at the air show. Which one was that? Just remind me, Mike. Just stick another one down there. I can't remember. I got so many from air shows. No. Do you think the F-35 will exceed expectations with its sensors and capability? From what I've heard from the TPs, you know, because obviously the guys going through as the TPs and the squadron shags now, I think it'll be an awesome bit of kit. You know, I'd love to be in now and be able to fly that thing. I still think going the Stovall route was a poor decision, but that's probably driven more by the fact that I think we were tied into a conventional carrier rather than a cat and trap. Because I think, you know, the US and pretty much every other Navy have shown that you don't need a vertical land and short takeoff capability. And actually, it's a bit of a hindrance if you're coming back with lots of weapons and fuel on board. Ian, was the Jaguar forgiving aircraft? Absolutely not. No. It would bite you massively. Yeah, I'm quite glad they didn't use it as a trainer, because we would have lost a lot of students. You had a limit of 17, 14 or 12 alpha depending on the fit, which is not very much. And the problem was you would blank the tail fin and you start to lose directional control. So the nose would start to slice. It would tell you, and you know, you could quite happily take it right to the limit, but the nose would start to wander. And if you keep pulling, then the chances are you will depart by slicing the nose one way. You then blank one of the wings, the other one's got a lot more lift, and then that's you into the spin. And if you spin in the T-bird, it's irrecoverable because it's very long. It's a fight between the gyroscopic forces and the aerodynamic forces, and unfortunately the gyroscopic forces were very, very strong in the Jag, and it would go into a what they call like a falling leaf. It didn't spin, it just fell. I mean, you drop a house brick and it's probably about the same. So and the other one was if you pushed and rolled. So you'd push and roll, and you'd have a yaw roll coupling. So you would, because the weight through the longitudinal axis, it had a heavy nose, and then it had a heavy, so you had a below the axis at the front and then high up at the axis at the back. So if you pushed and rolled, you're rolling about a displaced axis, and what would happen then was essentially the nose would go down, the rear would come up, and it would flick. Very unpleasant. So yeah, a push and roll were a massive no-no for us. So was it forgiving? Absolutely not. But once you knew when she was grumbling, it wasn't that bad. You could tell. Which aircraft was most capable of performing air-to-ground missions, the Jag or the Tornado? 6 and 2 3s really. By the time the Jag was in its final fit, it was really easy to use. You had the helmet mounted sight, so high level CAS was a piece of cake. It had the IDM, so you could talk to the FAC on the ground. So for forward air controlling stuff, I'd say the Jag probably had the edge. Tornado had bigger legs and could carry more. So in that respect, and you had a dude in the back who could work the targeting pod and stuff. So traditional strike missions, possibly the Tornado, but at CAS, I think the Jag may have had the edge. Yeah, Mike. Sorry. We went to an air show in the Czech Republic, and we'd started up, and we'd been there all weekend, and we'd had a hilarious weekend. It was great fun, and we were leaving on the Monday morning, and the my leader, he'd said to us before we go, he said, right, we're just going to go, we're not going to do anything fancy, we're not going to do any fly past, anything like that. And as we fired up, the tower, we sort of asked for a taxi, and the tower said, yeah, for sure, if you could do a fly past as well, that'd be great. And you could just see the leader, his head sort of went down in his hands, because he said he wasn't going to do one, but he'd been begged to do it by the tower. So of course we got airborne, ran around, and then snotted through. And they asked us for another pass, but we didn't quite have the gas, which was unfortunate. But, let's have a look. What do we got? Hardest maths. Yeah, normally fuel, and that's with any aircraft. But generally, you have rules of thumb. You always have generally have range to base somewhere in your head-up display if you're getting that worried. So you would be able to work out how high you need to go, which was, so say it was 300 miles. I think it was half the height. So you go to flight level 150 at max dry, and then you just use rules of thumb. And generally they were pretty good because they've been honed. And that's really the hardest maths you have. The rest of it is generally always done on the ground. Everything else you can do in the kit. And if sometimes you'd need it, if you had to work out some reversionary settings for weapons, that was pretty tough. But generally, if you got down to rev, which is just essentially a dumb sight, you're probably going to miss anyway, so you didn't bother. Lima Zulu, since you could carry 9 Lima as a GR pilot, how often did you train in the air-to-air role? In Oman, we did a lot. In Oman, we used to hold daylight queue. So you'd have a clean clean Jag on cue with 2.9 Limas and 2 guns full of 120 HE. So yeah, we'd actually have in Oman, I think every fourth week was an air-to-air week, and they just strip everything off the jets and you just go out and do doggers, and it was great fun. You get 25-minute trips. You do 1v1, 2v1. You never did 1v1v1 because it was just that the fights were a bit too big. We did 1v1v1 in the Hawk, but we'd never do that in the Jag because the fight is so big that it's too easy to lose people. And once you lose, once your SA starts to break down in that environment, you just can't do it. Because we had no radar, so we couldn't exit the fight, come back in, have a look at the radar and see where everybody is. It's literally Mark 1 eyeball. But yeah, in terms of ground attack, I mean, air to air, yeah, in Oman we used to do it. We used to fight down to 150 feet AGL, which was pretty sporty. And if you had experienced guys, you could you could have a 50-foot clearance. So you'd merge at 50 feet, you'd fight at 150, down at 150 feet, and you could run away at 50 feet as well. So yeah, that really, and if you're 8,000 feet in a clean jet and you're going to pitch in somebody, roll and pull through, you have to make pretty damn sure you know the performance of the aircraft. So AF Locker, got any tips for prospective pilots joining the RAF? Yeah, keep trying. Any other tips? Mental maths, speed, distance, time is good. Yeah, you've got to be able to, I would say, guesstimate very quickly. And a lot of people are interested because they go, well, you know, you're thinking of so many things. How do you keep it all in your head at once? Well, actually, you don't. I consider it a deck of cards. Each, you know, so when you start off with flying training, you have maybe sort of 4 cards. One of them is flying, one of them is fuel, one of them is keeping straight and level, and one of them is radio. And what you do is you cycle through them and you go, right, am I flying? Yes, I'm flying. And right, what's the fuel? Okay, fuel. Okay, I'm okay. As you get better, you pick up more cards in your pack, but you manage to cycle through them quicker and quicker and quicker. And it's that ability to think about one thing very quickly, make an assessment, and then move on to the next one is very useful. So if you can prioritize and move through stuff, that's a real benefit if you're going through flying training. The Franco Community Intertrain delivering special weapons? Well, no. They were phased out on the Jag, so, and to be honest, quite glad actually. Having talked to guys on Canberra Tornado Fleet, etc., it was a massive ball ache. If it's capable of flying for the new QE carriers, that mean that necessity of Stovall? Yeah, Stovall is massively overstated. It was great when the Harrier, in my opinion, my humble opinion, when the Harrier was hiding out in woods in West Germany. Yes, it was great. Now that we've got aircraft with huge amounts of power and all the rest of it, yeah, I think Stovall's a bit overrated, to be honest. Max payload. Hold on a minute, I've just lost it. Okay, max payload fully armed Jag. Max takeoff weight was about 15 and a bit tons. You could get airborne if you really wanted to with 8,000 pounders on, but you need a really long runway and need a cold day. It very much depends on length of the runway and outside temperature. You know, we would, in thumb rate with an 11,000 foot runway and, you know, an LGB on and 5 tons of fuel, you're struggling because obviously temperature above the runway gets to plus 50, plus 60 even. So the engine is taking in very, very hot air anyway. So yeah. Miko, How was it like to live and work in Oman culturally? What about experience where flew Omani strikeys? Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I found the Omanis a very pleasant bunch. There were some cultural differences, if I can say that, on our outlook in terms of how we flew. But ultimately, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm not so sure I'd enjoy some of the other countries in the Middle East. But Oman, yeah, I loved. I had a great 3 years. Certainly, things have changed a little bit from the bad old days of the hunters and the strikeys, but certainly the rules were a lot more flexible. Like I say, we'd fly 150 feet on goggles at night in a four-ship with a visual bounce, which you could never do in the UK. Air combat down to 150 feet, not a chance of doing that in the UK. So from my perspective, it was great fun. It was, you push the Jag right to the limits, and, you knocked off at 1:30 every day. Generally, so you could be on the beach by 3, which was nice. Adam, as PPL holder, I was one flying a Chipmunk when I saw what I think was a Jag streak past a bit below me and open FIR to me. Do RAF pilots think PPL is a bit of a nuisance? No, not at all. If you're in Class G airspace, it's see and avoid. There's only so much you can do. Lookout wise, if you do see an aircraft flying around and it's at low level, then you probably start looking out for his mate, because they normally fly around in pairs or fours. But the only time PPLs can be a bit of a nuisance is when is if you're talking on the same frequency and the PPL starts telling his life story while you're doing 7.5 miles a minute. That can be a bit of a pain, but otherwise, you're there, you're allowed to use the airspace as much as we are. But it's always good to know where the congestion points are, things like the McCuntleth Loop, Coningsby Gap. There are various places where fast jets are forced through, potentially at low level. So if you can avoid those, you'd be doing yourself a favour and everybody else. Antares, no, I never flew in northern Norway. That was 41 Squadron. They used to do the recce up there. So no, unfortunately, I never had the joy of going up there. Hey, Flocker, no worries. You are welcome. Has any Jag pilot buzzed the tower like a certain? Yeah, I mean, most guys beat up the airfield on their last day at the squadron. I did. In fact, I was the second because there was another guy leaving at the same time. So I came. He went down the runway at 0'6", and then the station commander was on the phone to 54 Squadron. At which point I flew over the top of his office at about 540 knots and 100 feet because it was an airfield attack. So yeah, that was good fun. That was great timing. So yes, we have buzzed the tower and it's great fun. Stefan, how much pilot effort went into flying the Jag versus use it as a weapon system? One jet's 20%, 80%, use it tactically. It depends how much you've flown it. Certainly when you are new to it, it's 70-30. By the time I left with 1,000 hours on it, yeah, 20-80. But give it some crap weather, and you're starting to fly it a bit harder. But by that time you've really got a feel for the aircraft, and you don't really think about it. So yeah. How do you balance work, family life during your service? Well, I didn't have a family, so generally it was work. Pure and simple. I had a great time. I was in for 12 years and I didn't have a wife or a girlfriend really, to speak of. So I did what every junior pilot does and throws himself into it. Was it a ball ache? Could be. some of it, some of the stuff was, but I also, had an absolute ball. So I loved it. I think I wouldn't be able to cope with it now. There's a lot of BS goes on in the Air Force. Certainly talking to my mates who are less enchanted with it than they were. John, can the upgraded Jags use FLIR air-to-air to spot other aircraft like F-14 TCS? No, not really. We had tiled, but because we didn't have any air, well, certainly the F-16s now, the modern F-16, when we were with the block, I'm just trying to think which block they were. I think they were block 50s, maybe they were 60s, can't remember. Man, they had the all singing, all dancing, and they could slave the radar or slave the targeting pod. Essentially, I think it was a sniper pod. They could target, they could slew that to the air-to-air radar, so they could identify at night, or they could, and use the infrared on that, but certainly not on the Jag, because there was really nothing we could slew it to. You had to see it, and in which case, if you could see it, it was a bit too late. AO Flocker, yeah, holding sucks. I did it for a year. Yeah, holding, to those of you who don't know, is when you come out of any stage of training, if there isn't a slot for you somewhere in either the next stage of training or on an OCU or something, you go into the holding pool. And certainly when I came out of officer training, I was a bag carrier for the AOC and commandant at Cranwell. I did that for several months, probably 8-9 months. And then fortunately I went to 6th Squadron and held on a Jag Squadron, which is where I got my love of the Jag from. So, yeah. Hey, Flugger, what do you make of the Yank tactics at the time? Was it stark difference from Ocelot? Yeah, it was, certainly compared to the Jag, because they had nice bits of kit. They had sparkly bits of kit with good, big sticks on board, huge amounts of power. You only got to look at the F-16, and that's a, lovely machine. I always used to joke that anybody could be an OCA commander in the Air Force, because all they used to do was run in the F-15Cs in 8-ship wall and just shoot anything in front of you. So, yeah, we had to be devious, and we had to work really hard because the jet just didn't really perform. And unfortunately, I lost a very good friend of mine due to poor performance when we were out in Maple Flag. So, and he was an exceptional pilot. So, we had to work hard to make the Jag a good, to get the most from it, really. Navalized Jag, sorry, the Freckle Puny. What would you have thought of Navalized Jag? Yeah, no, not enough power. Would have been a rotten idea. Adam Cotton, I've always heard the Jag is very underpowered. Why was the engine never upgraded? It started off with 102s, and they were dreadful, apparently, even worse. And then by the time I got there, they were 104s with 16,000 pounds of thrust, both of them in full blower. You had 10,000 pounds of thrust in dry. They tried to update it with the 106s to give you slightly higher TGT, but that just turned in. It was going so hot that they ended up, with quite a few failures, and essentially they pushed what was the Adore right to the limits, and you couldn't fit anything else in there. So they were never changed out for anything bigger, because from the engineering perspective, just wouldn't have worked. Miko, having watched your recent Jag cockpit tour video, I must say it looks really challenging to master, not that pilot friendly. Yeah, it was what we describe as an ergonomic slum. A lot of stuff you had to do by feel. So, a lot of the FEMAT and stuff, which was the chaff, was right out of the way. Fortunately, a lot of the stuff, once you'd set it, you didn't have to twiddle with it, which was good. But yeah, you're not wrong, Miko. It was an ergonomic slum. But like I say, once you sorted everything, actually it was pretty easy to use. The biggest nightmare was if you had a fuel problem, because the fuel was moderately complicated, nothing like a tornado. But if it went wrong, you could trap fuel in various places and there was no way to get it back, in which case you were heavy, low on fuel, so using what little you had faster. So you had to be hot on fuel checks. John Ellis, ever flown an F5 Tiger? I've flown any helmet cube, flare, radar, slow, magnitudes. The only thing I've flown is the T-38. I'm surprised he smoked the F-22. A mate of mine flew Block 50s in the States, the F-16, and they did 8v1s against the F-22 on a fairly regular basis. And he said they got whipped every time. So eight F-16 Block 50s, one F-22, and they just used to get reamed all the time. So yeah, he's obviously using some sneaky beaky tactics. I quite like the T-38, but this was when I was back in it. I think I was, how old was I? End of university, so 21. So I didn't really have that much experience, so I couldn't give you a true, honest opinion what it was like. Ridiculous roll rate though. I can tell you about T-38. It was something like 700 degrees a second. So yeah, crazy. See A37B, yeah, tight cockpit, yeah. Swedish fastjet cockpits, Drakenvigen, yeah, very stark. Yeah, well, the Jaguar initially started out better in many respects, but over time they added stuff because they went, essentially it was a trainer. And then they thought, oh, we could just add this, and then we could just add that, and then, oh, well, how about we do this? So they used to. One of the worst bits was when they had the old, was it not Navwas? You had a Navwas system, which was the old inertial, and they had it mounted in front of the joystick, down between your legs. So in order to input anything, you had to lean forwards and then look out. Sorry, so from looking out, you had to look down between your legs to type in anything. And they actually had a few guys hit the ground. One guy hit the cliffs as he was coasting back in because he was looking down, and as you were leaning forwards, you push down on the thing. So that's why they moved it up. So you became pretty adept at using your left hand as a typewriter. But yeah, again, it goes back to Miko's point, which was it's an ergonomic slum. But yeah, it's not very user friendly because they just kept adding bits and pieces. Basically, the F-180, 38, the F-22 would have issues. Its pilots manage the energy airspeed properly and it's find a new radar lock. Interesting. Yeah, I mean the F-22. Good bit of kit, it really, I mean, that's air supremacy at its best. And I think Red Flag, one of them I think he got 10 kills in one mission, because, he used up all his slammers and then he had to switch to guns, and got a couple of kills with the guns, which is pretty impressive, I mean, and he wasn't touched, so tell us a bit about revolution gyros. Yeah, well, I now fly auto gyros or gyrocopters, and I'm an instructor, so I teach Joe Bloggs how to fly, which is a challenge in itself sometimes. But we're looking, actually, where my interest lies is survey work and trying to get the commercial version. There is a commercial version out there, and we're going through the process, the R&D now, of trying to strap on a 300,000-pound sensor to the front of the gyro to take laser measurements and sort of high quality mapping data. We're also looking at multispectral stuff. all kinds of bits and pieces. Looking potentially at looking at wind turbines as well. Ideally, I'd quite like to get into the anti-poaching lark. So yeah, there's lots going on, but you know, you've got to earn everything. You can't just go and do this fun stuff. So I have to go and fly. Yeah, I have to go and fly with Joe Blogs to pay the bills. John, any pilots you know ejected out? Yeah, quite a few. Not me, fortunately, touch wood. But you can always tell Jag mates if they've ever had to bang out, because they've got a scar on their chin, because you used to have a oxygen regulator mounted here, and as you pull the handle, the first thing that happened was your head snapped down, hit the regulator, and you used to come out with a nice big scar on your chin. That's better than a tie. What's your current opinion on such collaborative aircraft produced like the Jag? Yeah, Chillstream. Were they ultimately successful, or did various national demands and compromises lead to too many sacrifices? Yeah, I think you nailed it there. I would say if you're going to make a jet for your nation, you want to do it on your own, or you want to buy a good bit of kit and upgrade it on your own. That's my opinion. I think Typhoon was so long, you know, I mean, what did it come out as first? The EAP, was that in the 90s? And it's taken forever to get here. So yeah, I think if you're going to do it, I think it's more expensive to do it. Well, is it more expensive? Probably not more expensive to do it on your own. But I think if you're each going to chuck, let's say, 100 billion into a 400 billion project, if you were going to do that project on your own as one nation instead of four nations putting in 100 billion each, it would probably still cost you 250 billion, maybe, I don't know. But you keep everything in-house. Well, that's my opinion. Kip, so what happens on your very last day in the RAF? This may sound silly, but do you hand in your flying kit, get P45 a couple of weeks later? It must feel like a bit like, yeah, very much so. I was lucky in that I had my last day in Oman, and then I had about 3 months leave. So I was still getting paid. So I went off around the world, flew around the world, did all those things that I'd always wanted to do. I went, dived the Great Barrier Reef, got my accelerated freefall license for parachuting, great white sharks. I went cage diving, went to New Zealand and just, I don't know, asked around for 2 weeks in a camper van. I had a great time. But yeah, it is very much like being cut adrift. When you come back, or when I came back to the UK, you go to your home base, you hand all your kit back, all your flying gear back, and yeah, literally you get a P45 a few weeks later, and that's it. Yeah, it's I think it's why a lot of guys do suffer, you know, and do find it difficult to reintegrate, because you are kind of mollycoddled in the service in some ways, but you're part of a bigger team. So when you arrive and your job is OCB flight, or you are OC AMF, say, if you're an engineer, everybody knows your role. You pick up where the last guy left off and nobody bats an eyelid. Whereas actually in Civvy Street, it's very much more of a kind of semi-emotional kind of game, and you've got to get to know people and blah this, and, you know, it's a bit more difficult, a bit more wishy-washy, I think, in Civvy Street. Kane, how hard is Jaguar to fly, for example, takeoff and landing, I'm assuming? Pretty easy. Point it down the runway and stick the blowers in and wait till it gets airborne. I oversimplify. The worst thing would be to have an engine failure, in which case you've got to be on your game, because if you're heavy and it's hot, you need to clear the aircraft pretty quick. Handling wise, she was fine around the circuit. You know, she was just a bit of a pig. You know, she didn't have a particularly large wing, and she was quite heavy sometimes. So yeah, it was. I never had a problem with her, but you know, some of the students did. Miko, during your days in the Air Force, was the combat role of the Jag already changed from Cold War era low-level penetration, high-level smart weapons? Yeah, yeah, very much so. The Cold War, and I joined sort of post-Cold War, was very much rush in low-level, track a target, get out. We still did that because, you know, if you can fly at low level in a high threat environment, you can fly at high to medium level. So, you know, the difficulty would be if you gave up the low level, which is kind of the way things are going at the moment, and purely concentrate on the high level stuff. As soon as the threat at high level becomes too high, what are you now going to do? You've got to get down to low level again. So yeah, we kind of dual rolled it. We did a lot of medium level night stuff with the thermal imager and the laser designator, LGBs as well. We didn't have anything like JDAM, no GPS guided stuff when I was in. That's come in now with the modern LGBs. But yeah, we were sort of dual role, and I think nowadays it's pretty much more medium to high level, smart bomb type stuff. Mr. Saito Jack, do you think you remember my partner Luke Farley was a mechanic on Jags in the first Gulf War? Chris Ronnie Sell. I don't, to be honest. Sorry, Saito Jack. I don't remember him. If he had a nickname, I might remember. I might remember him, but unless he was on 54 between 2000 2003, I may not have run into him. John Ellis, can a Jag drop bombs while inverted with positive Gs? Yes, but you're not going to hit anything other than the ground. You could, just trying to think, yeah, you would never really want release anything inverted. You can release positive, you can release while under G. We used to have something called toss, a toss maneuver where you would run into a target, and at a predetermined position, it knew the position of the target ahead of you. You'd run the bomb full line through it, and then at a predetermined position, you'd get an X would appear in the HUD, and it would just disappear off the top of the HUD, and all you would do is what we call capture the cross. So you would pull up, put the VV, the velocity vector, on the cross, and as soon as you capture the cross, you commit. So you hit the red button, and when the computer thinks you're going to hit, it will then release the bomb, and the bomb does either a 15 or 30 degree toss, roughly, and you toss it in, and then you had to overbank to 135 and pull, just I think 12 alpha, which is about 4.5 G, purely on the instruments. And then by the time your standby AI was at 90 degrees, was level, you needed to be 90 degrees. And then, because that was a very critical stage of flight, if you overpulled with slightly inverted, you could end up on, in the drink or in the ground fairly quickly. You are welcome, Miko. It's the first time I've been called brilliant, I'll tell you that much. Kane, why were the air brakes out on startup? Very good question. Probably because, if my memory serves me right, you had just trying to think, I think the GTS used to have like a mini gas turbine, and the exhaust would come out through the air brakes. I think that was why. Yeah, pretty sure that was why. So you had to have the air brakes open to start the gas turbine, which you would then select, and the gas turbine had a wastegate, and the wastegate would exit under where the air brakes were. Hugo, how often do you used to drop live bombs in training missions? Yeah, very rarely. The UK was very difficult to drop live munitions. You could go up to Garvey Island, but that was right in the north of Scotland. When I was in Oman, we always used to get airborne with one gun, and 120 or 60 rounds of HE bullets, because they had a range called Exhale, and you could go there and you could pretty much poop off anything. So yeah, I dropped an LGB, a couple of 1,000-pounders in Oman, and we used to regularly go through Exhale range and hose off, 60 or 120 rounds on a strafe FRA. Stefan, could you speak a little bit about the difficulties involved in performing the JAG mission profile at night? My question driven by current difficulties the Germans are having with the Tornado. Night is always difficult. Predominantly, I was on NVGs just as I left at the end of my first tour. Lots of airspace restrictions, crap weather. If you're on goggles, you sometimes didn't know if you're going into cloud. It was very difficult and then suddenly you'd be in cloud, and then you're in cloud at low level, which is never a nice place to be. It's just a very, very demanding role, and especially if you're going out as a 2-ship or even a 3-ship or something, and you're doing low level at night or even medium level at night. You've got to have a really good deconfliction plan. We didn't have an air-to-air radar, so it was all done visually. And if you're doing visually ranges, finding a range when you're wearing NVGs, almost impossible. You can pick up airliners 50 miles away and they look like they're 3 miles. So ranging is very difficult. So do you have an air-to-air TACAN plan? And you can only have one air-to-air TACAN, so you're only looking at one aircraft. So actually, yeah, very difficult. When the IDM and IDL came in, that added a real bonus because you could see where everybody was on your big telly. And it would also give you heights as well. So you could deconflict sort of that way. But very difficult. Deconfliction, when it all goes tits up, was difficult. When you were going through, sorry, Adam, when you were going through flying training, was the Jaguar always your ultimate goal? Did you ever come close to being chopped? Yeah, I guess Jag was my ultimate goal. I didn't want to be on the Harrier Force because I was too lazy. Did I ever come close to being chopped? Yeah, I did on the OCU twice, actually. Once was on the instrument flying phase because you do like the conversion phase and you'd get maybe 4 hours, so 5 hours, something like that. So your 4th trip was first solo. So you barely knew what was going on in terms of the equipment. And then they throw you into the T-Bird and you're expected to do stuff, TACAN approaches and all the rest of it, which was fine because we'd done TACAN approaches in the Hawk, but instrument flying on the Jag was very difficult because she wasn't very speed stable. And the standby instruments were a pig, so it just meant you were working your nuts off, especially as a student. And the second time was very close to the end of the course, doing evasion, and I sort of became obsessed with getting back together with my buddy and finding out where he was. And actually, I'd had a couple of extra rides. And I was sat at dinner one time and I was talking to one of the senior guys and I said, look, what's the priority here? Is it getting back together with your mate or is it just getting back on track? And the guy goes, screw your buddy, screw him. If he's disappeared, get back on track on time and he will appear. And sure enough, and that was it. That was the light bulb moment. And I never actually finished the course because I went flying with a couple of guys and they go, oh yeah, you've got it now. So we don't need to go through the last 2 or 3 sorties because it just clicked. And that was just one conversation. Stefan, awesome. Thank you very much. One of the best. Oh, that's nice. Adam, by the way, Kip, let me thank you for very comprehensive answers. Brilliant. Thank you. Oh, brilliant. I've been called brilliant twice in the same day. That's pretty awesome. What do you think about the A10? Do you think it was superior and more efficient than the Jag? Oh, I love the A10. Built for one purpose only, and that was tank busting. Wasn't really good for anything else because it was a bit slow. But I mean, who's not going to like a 30-foot Gatling gun strapped underneath you and more hard points than you can shake a stick at? I think in terms of a close air support platform, A10 superb, yeah, way better. But the Jag had its other benefits as